1. It is Locked On Jazz for the 30th of October. Happy Halloween. What a week it was. The Utah Jazz change ownership. We'll talk about that. Will free agency, trades, and the draft be impacted? That'll be on the discussions as well. We'll take your questions and your thoughts as we continue, plus why we're going to play December 22nd, no matter what people might be saying. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow! How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz MDA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Locked On Jazz, on the Utah Jazz community. Insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Oh, Instagram Live with some new formatics. Likes to see. James Barry, hello, howdy from Facebook. We are live on Twitch. We are live on Instagram, DLock09. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. And we should be live on that Twitter thing as well. And we are. So great to have all of you aboard. Thanks for tuning in today. And we'll take your questions, your thoughts. Obviously, a huge week in Utah Jazz history. And we'll also talk about why I think we're trying to stay on the news a little bit, despite the comments of Michelle Roberts, who I adore. I don't know her at all. But if I want Michelle Roberts supporting me in whatever I do in life. And I'll get to that in a second, but I still think we're starting December 22nd. Let me get all that into you, and thank you very much for tuning in. All right. Here's why we're starting December 22nd. What Michelle Roberts said this week is that none of the players want to do it. She came out against it. She supported the players. Her feedback's been negative, and she's doing exactly her job as the player rep. But the fact of the matter is there are 3 or 4 levers here that are being pulled at one time. And the way they're going to come out is we're going to play December 22nd. Here's what the levers are. Start date. Okay? First one is start date. We can debate start date, but start date impacts revenue, according to Mark Stein's New York Times article, to the point of $500 million for the league, who already has lost a decent amount, 1 point whatever billion. So therefore, Michelle Roberts says, hey, we don't want to start December 22nd. We're better with the January 18th, Martin Luther King Day. Our guys are tired. The league says, yeah, that's fine, but we're going to drop the salary cap, which is their next lever. And then there's no free agency money. Or they say, that's fine, but we're going to drop the salary cap. And then the third lever is escrow. And the escrow is a little complicated. The easiest way to talk about the escrow is if you own a house, you put a certain amount of payment away every month for the end of the year in case the taxes aren't right, and you put an escrow. It's really the exact same thing. You don't even realize you're doing it. The NBA players put a little bit in escrow every year because 51% of the revenue go to the owners and 49% go to the players. And therefore, when at the end of the year, if for some reason that number is off by a little bit, they can swing that money that's in escrow one way or the other. And so they will often put, I think it's like 10% in escrow, and it never moves much more than that. There is a very important rule here. The owners cannot claw back money that they've already given to the players. So once the players are paid money, if the 51.49 is like 12% off and escrow is only 10%, then the owners just lose 2%. So the escrow number has been floated at 40%, which if you listened to us earlier this week, we walked through as an astronomical number of what it does. Imagine having 40% of your take-home pay, pre-taxes, put aside so you don't get it. You can't make it. I couldn't make a single one of my payments. I'm not running that far in excess. Most of the NBA players aren't either. So maybe escrow is going to be 25% because of the unknown, which is still massive. So if, let's say it's 25%. Well, all of a sudden the league says, we don't want to play till January 18th. Hey, that's cool. We don't have to play till January 18th. We're good with that. By the way, that's going to mean your escrow is now 35%. Or it's 40%. And the key number here is the fact that the owners cannot claw back money. So the escrow number coming down gives the players at least a guarantee of what they're going to get paid, depending on if the world goes nuts again or continues to go nuts. Washington Post article was quite something, or that 10-minute video. So you can look at these things and weigh them, but here, so you have start date. And so when the players say we don't want to start December 22nd, fine. Tax is an interesting one. The tax is kind of a funky one. The tax number coming down is actually bad for the owners. So they'll probably keep the tax number we talked about on yesterday's show at 123, but they could bring the cap down, which suddenly means like nobody has cap space. There's no money. We're only doing mid-level exception free agent contracts. And then part two is the escrow is the really important one that they're going to play with. So we're starting December 22nd because Michelle Roberts has done exactly what she should do. She has supported her players. She has voiced the players, hey, you're rushing this on us. We're not into that. I'm not playing with your fake deadlines. But right now, every agent is talking to every player and saying, hey, by the way, like that 35% escrow, if you're making $5 million, means that 1.75 is never getting to you. And if you're making $5 million, you're paying $2 million in taxes, and you're now at 3. Well, now you're down to 1.25, and your agent's taking 4% off the front. Now you're down to $1 million of your $5 million is actually what you're getting. And then any of your other expenses, whether you have a chef or people or whatever you have, well, now you're suddenly you're getting paid like $800,000, $700,000 on your $5 million. Like it's crazy numbers. But by the way, that's the same thing as going from 50,000 to 7,000. Yes, that's what I just did. From 50,000, that rocks our world, right? We all get that number. Fine, from 100,000 to 14,000, 10 million to 104, like that's what we're talking about. So we're playing December 22nd. Okay, we're playing December 22nd. All right, let's open up your thoughts on everything. It's been quite a week. Ryan and Ashley Smith take over ownership of the Utah Jazz. I actually woke up kind of either yesterday or this morning. I can't remember. Just kind of stunned. Like, wow, the Millers do not own. I don't work for the Millers anymore. Like on a personal note, like the reason I came back, for those who don't know the story, I'll share it here if you don't mind, is during the NBA Finals, at the end of the NBA Finals back in 1998, the mailman got upset at the end of the finals and went after myself and Tom Nasalki when we were hosting the Afternoon Drive show and basically threatened our jobs and our livelihood and our existence. And Larry pretty much picked up the phone, called me and said, hey, I'll make the decisions on our franchise. Don't worry about it. And it was incredible. Like, there's nothing like more scary than being 27, 28 years old and having, one level being on the top of the world. You got the number one sports talk show in the country. You're program director of radio station number one. And you got the superstar of the town basically saying, like, I'm not playing another day here unless this guy gets fired. It's suboptimal. So I got a phone call from Larry that basically said, like, hey, that's not how we do things in our family, in our organization. Like, I'll make the decisions, just be cool. So I had unbelievable loyalty to Larry for that moment. Now I decided my career was at a point at 28 years old where I was number one in the market, number one in the country, number one in program director. Like, if I didn't go at that point, I was never going. And my hubris meant that I had to go to a bigger market. And so I went to Seattle. And then when I got let go in Seattle on the move from the Sonics to Oklahoma City, I actually was being paid for a year. And so I was still an egomaniac and was not planning really to go to work. I had a kindergartner and a baby, and I thought I'll just stay home for a year and get paid a lot of money and hang out with them. And I got Randy Rigby, who's unbelievable, huge mentor in my life. And I were talking, and he had said, like, hey, could you come back? And I was kind of wavering, and we love Seattle. My wife really loves Seattle. My wife was a sideline reporter for the Seahawks at the time, and I was going to, blow up her life. And so I was really kind of wondering. And then I think Larry called, or Larry sent message. I can't remember which, that like, I'd like you back. And so I came. Like, that was it. Like, once considering what he had done for me, the first time, in the moment of crisis, it was time for me then to pay him back. So then we moved back to Utah for that. Like, that was just a loyalty play. You just do it. And so for me to suddenly realize that the Millers, like, I know it hasn't been Larry, but Gail is this incredibly don't own the franchise anymore. I got to admit, over the last 48 hours, it has been a little bit like, whoa, crazy. But it's evolution, it's change, it's where we are. So let's get your questions. We'll talk about it, what we think the impact is, your thoughts on it, free agency, draft. We can talk about all of it. It's continuing on the show. Friday edition of the show brought to you by our good friends over at Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. The Hyundai brand, I didn't know a great deal about it, honestly, when I got into the relationship with the Murdochs. I remember sitting around a table and talking with them and having them teach me about who their family was, and I'm sitting there trying to make sure I don't mispronounce Hyundai. Well, since then, what I've learned is, I've bought 2 Hyundai since then is really what's happened. But what I learned along the way is you get more for your dollar, you get more features, you get more bells, you get more whistles, you get more safety features than you can get from anyone else. And you get it at an amazing price. They just own that aspect of the market. So if you're looking for a car right now, at least include the Hyundai in your search so that you can understand what you can get for your value. Now, I always say this. You got to decide what you want and what looks right to you and what you want to do. And that's up to you. But I'll set you up so that you get a VIP experience at any of the Hyundai locations. And I will then make sure that you get get that experience, and then you can decide whether Hyundai is the right car for you. So email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com to let me set up that meeting for you if you're looking for a car right now, and we'll get you the Murdoch Sure experience at Murdoch Hyundai. 4646 South State Street, located in Logan and in Linden. Today's show is also brought to you by rockauto.com. Same prices for a do-it-yourselfer as a professional with unbelievable selection at their unique, easy to navigate, little bit old school website, rockauto.com. You can check out what parts are available for your vehicle, choose the brands, app specifications, and prices you prefer. Best of all, as I said, same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. So why spend up to twice as much at a brick and mortar store? Because their parts are in short supply. Right? Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us section so that we know who sent you. That's Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliably low prices and all the parts you'll ever need. It's rockauto.com. All right, let's get to the question section of the program. Bill Hendrick says, I think Ryan Smith will add a new flavor and hopefully aggression to the team. So we will see. So to the team, or do you mean by free agency acquisitions? Like, the hope is that Ryan Smith has so much money that he's able to do it. Now, I actually don't know what I don't understand this kind of money. So it's hard for me to do, I know he owned 88% of the company and they sold for $8 billion. So I can do that. And then you have taxes. And I don't know how it all plays. What is stock? What is cash? What can he handle for losses? I don't have any idea on any of that. But the obvious hope is that he is able to. But I also don't think there's a lot of cases you can go through in the Miller ownership where we cut a corner and we play safe or we didn't spend the money. I think that's something that's equally as important for us to kind of talk about, is that I don't think there's a million cases where you look at where you say, oh, if we had real money ownership, that we could have done something very differently than what we've done. I don't have that kind of feeling. Now, maybe I'm a Pollyanna and I bought in, but I don't feel like, went and paid $30 million, went and got Mike Conley. There would have been a lot easier answers on that. So I think it's interesting. From Justin, if we have another Russell Westbrook, all right, it's not Russell Westbrook's, I hate the way we've labeled this, racist fan incident. Do you think that Ryan Smith can handle it with the grace that Gail Miller did? I don't know the answer to that because these are all the things. And I think that what we have to be fair to Ryan and Ashley Smith is that they're going to probably handle it better in 2031 than they will in 2021 and better in 2041 and 2051. Like, you roll into this job as though you're supposed to be some expert on how to manage a sports franchise. It's a brand new job. Like, I'm sure Ryan Smith was a better CEO of Qualtrics in year 5 than he was in year 1. I'm sure Ashley Smith is a better president of her dance studio in year 5 than she was in year 1. Like, there's an evolution to learning how to be a sports owner. It's so crazy different. First of all, you lose, which neither of these people have ever done in their lives. They've been incredibly successful. Secondarily, you're in the public limelight or spotlight in a way where you get criticized for things in a way they've never been. So you have to evolve. I mean, hey, Larry Miller is one of the greats of all time. He choked a fan, right? Like, it's hard. It's really, really hard. Like, young Larry H. Miller had some problems because this is really hard. And we've got to be respectful to that there is a learning curve to it. So I think Ryan Smith's track record, Ryan Smith on social issues is a place very open about how he feels. I mean, he made an incredible statement on June 16th where he donated, I think it was $3 to every dollar anybody of his employees to 6 organizations, which included Social Justice, Black Lives Matter, ACLU, Black Girls, something or other. And I apologize, I don't remember the other 2 off the top of my head. I mean, that's a putting your money where your mouth is. So, when the group out there wanted to try to get publicity for their company and free marketing by claiming that they weren't going to renew their suite, Ryan Smith was the one who said, hey, fine, let me know because I'll take it so we can give it to underprivileged kids who don't get to go to games. I mean, he's pretty amazing on some of these areas, all of these areas. So does he handle it with that kind of grace? I think easily. But I think just in general, what I'm trying to say is we got to give him some rope. Like, you're going from a 30-year veteran to a brand new experience. Back to basketball from Peter. What do you think is more likely? Gobert is traded or Gobert is extended? I think it's much more likely that Gobert is extended. I think the talk and all the internet chatter about Gobert being traded is simply that there's not a lot of interesting names out there to talk about in regards to being traded. And so when you start to think about having, when you start to, like, if you're an internet clickbaiter or talk show host trying to create discussion or podcaster trying to take discussion, like, I'm not trying to criticize, there aren't a lot of really interesting people. Like, there's Al Horford, there's Tobias Harris, there's Rudy Gobert, there's Mike Conley, there's Russell Westbrook, there's Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert just out of money in Brooklyn. There's Buddy Hield. That's not that interesting. What other names are there that we can play trade games with? Like, that makes sense that you're, like, if you try to trade LeBron, you're obviously fooling. So there aren't that many people out there that you can play trade games with right now. And frankly, I've done it, right? Like, we played Tobias Harris, Al Horford yesterday on the show. Gordon Hayward. So there's about 12 names. Like, every trade thing you're seeing, which is all, like, it's fun. And I'm not even being critical of clickbaity stuff here on this, but every single one you're seeing involve those players. So I think it's much more likely that Rudy gets extended than gets traded. And my point on this is all of the chatter that's about Rudy getting traded, I don't think is coming from anywhere other than just that there aren't a lot of places out there, aren't a lot of people out there to talk about. Speaking of which, I saw a fake trade of Rudy and Ed Davis to the Celtics for Gordon, Daniel Tice, and some first-round picks. Good trade. Also, Rudy for Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams. Do you do either of these? Okay. My general answer to anything with Rudy is no, because I just think Rudy is great. I think he makes us elite level defensively. I think he, go look at the data of what we are offensively. Anytime he's on the floor with a stretch 4, we're great. So I'm a general no on anything involving trading Rudy. Now, let me just take your question rather than just dismissing it in some no fun way. Let's be clickbaity. Woohoo! Clickbait trade talk. It's so fun. Gordon Hayward, Daniel Tice, and some first-round picks. So you're probably talking Memphis, some really good pick? Probably not. You'd have to really believe that you could be good defensively in some way. I think Gordon's hit his peak, maybe below his peak as he ages off injuries. And so, I mean, frankly, Gordon Hayward with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell is like the greatest player we could ever imagine having, right? It's Joe Ingles, but better. But instead of Rudy, I don't think so. Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams, frankly, gets a little interesting because you have to make an evaluation at that point of whether or not you think Jaylen Brown can be a superstar. And I think there's a chance he can be a superstar. I think there's a real chance he could be a superstar. And so on that one, if I'm the Jazz, I have to really consider, can somebody else anchor the defense well enough and bring that we add another, like Jaylen Brown's, and then you have 2 all-star wings. That, like, we're talking. And only because I believe that I think Jaylen Brown can be a top 15, top 20 player in the NBA. I think he's that good. I didn't always think that, but I watched him, and I think if you're Boston, you have to really consider this, because I just don't think Jaylen Brown is going to be happy doing the role he had in the playoffs last year where he's sitting out in the corner all the time. To me, that's not going to work for Jaylen Brown. By the way, there is so much Locked On content right now, I don't even know what to tell you. Okay. Chad Ford's NBA Big Board, back. 2 episodes, Jeremy Wu on this week, and John Hollinger. Hollinger and Duncan, Locked On NBA, bunch of stuff. Great stuff. Locked On NBA or Hollinger and Duncan did their regular this week. I think they dropped on Thursday with a new live show. And then massive Locked On NBA stuff. Great coverage of all sorts of things. And our NFL stuff is off the charts as well. So make sure you grab all of that on the Locked On Podcast Network. Monday, we'll get back to analyzing teams and free agents, and I'll have watched draft players over the weekend. So we'll get back into our rhythm. Obviously, this week was very different. Jeff Jansen, do you think Darren Williams will get his number retired one day? I think we're closer to that today with Ryan Smith and with, the mending of fences with Jerry and with Jerry's passing. Probably, and he probably deserves to. He was certainly the signature player of an era for us. I think so. Do you think Ryan Smith will continue the Jazz tradition of avoiding the luxury tax? Like, I would think so, because the luxury tax is prohibitive and crazy for anybody to get into. Like, I love this luxury tax thing. As a fan, we've created this standard, like, will you go into the luxury tax? As though it's like your machismo, right? Like, using some male sexism here for a second, like your macho machismo is, will you go to will I pay $3 on $1 of salary? Will I be a beeping financial idiot? Like, when has been the time that we should have gone into the luxury tax that we didn't? When is the time that our season would have been different had we gone into the luxury? There's actually no sign that always spending makes that, like, the Lakers certainly spent and the other teams have spent, but the Lakers also haven't spent and they won. Like, LeBron is what won. So, I mean, I got your snarky little bullcrap in there about, like, oh, here we go. Like, I'm going to go. How about we just be smart with our basketball decisions and make good basketball decisions, which we won't 100% of the time. We're going to miss. Like, that's the reality. It's not an exact science. But, will he go into luxury tax? I don't think the Millers ever said that they wouldn't go into the luxury tax if the time was right. Eric Wood from Facebook, hoping the Jazz make a move to get I don't even know how to pronounce it. Sadiki Bey. I do not know him yet. I've not watched him. I'll put him on my list. I've watched 3 players so far in the NBA draft. All right. Here's a very long answer that I can't put up on the screen, but I will read you. All right, let's see what he's going with here. Let me see if I can get this all put together. Mike Conley's awesome and we love him, but Rudy and Donovan are coming up to get paid. We need to take advantage of their primes as much as possible. Donovan has shown he can be a full-time point guard, and his height lends him to needing to be a primary position. So Mike is redundant. Shouldn't it be our main priority to trade Mike now, use his contract to bring in effective players on slightly longer-term contracts before the cap restricts our spending ability? Specifically, bring in 1 or 2 players whose contracts will at the end be the same at the same time as Rudy and Donovan's next extensions, at which point Rudy might have aged out of effectiveness and Donovan will be 28-year-old era. I think, yes. Fundamentally, sure. I think that Donovan becomes a primary ball handler. I think Donovan is 6'1", and so he's probably got to play that position. I think Mike can be crazy valuable still, so let's not dismiss that. I think that you could trade Mike Conley's $30 million contract for another contract that equal $30 million. You're going to be right. Now, what happens is next year, when both Donovan and Rudy kick in, if you've brought somebody else in for 30 and you still have Bojan Bogdanovic and you still have Joe Ingles extension, you're pushing toward that luxury tax at a pretty high level. So you'd have to really play with some things in there. But who is it? Like, are you wanting to buy it? We talked about it yesterday, like Tobias Harris for 4 years. Like, I'm not sure I want to do Tobias Harris for 4 years. Am I willing to do Al Horford for 3 years? I don't know about, like, part of the problem here in this is, are you willing to go get, no one's giving you a $30 million player who's not got either too long a contract that they don't want, right? Like, they're giving away something at $30 million that they don't want, because $30 million that you want is a superstar. So by definition, if you're trading Mike Conley's $30 million contract for another $30 million player, what you're really probably getting is some sort of negative contract or overpaid player. Now, if it fits perfectly to you, maybe. But that's a pretty hard find. Like, I love Tobias Harris. I've always loved Tobias Harris. His pick and roll numbers are good. His pure shooting numbers are good. I've always thought he could play with the ball in his hands in Quinn's system at a fabulous level. Those numbers are astronomically high, and that contract is long. And he, frankly, has not shown a lot of oomph at times when he plays. He got lost in a manner that was unnerving to watch this year in Philadelphia. Like, I love Tobias Harris, and I did not like watching him at all this year, as he just seemed to have no zest and no fight to his game. I love Al Horford. Oh my gosh. He moves the ball. He's so smart. He's a brilliant defensive player. He was a large part why Atlanta was so good. He was brilliant in Boston. That contract is long, and he's 34 years old. Like, you're taking the way you move Mike Conley's $30 million contract is you're bringing back somebody else's $30 million contract, probably with multiple years on it, and you better make sure that's going to work. Right? Is Donovan Mitchell, Al Horford, and Rudy Gobert? God, I kind of love it, but at the same time, like, that's scary. And if Joel Embiid and Al Horford didn't work, are Rudy Gobert and Al Horford going to work? I kind of love the idea of Tobias Harris and then Tobias to the 3, Bojan to the 4. I don't actually care. It's 2 not very good defensive players with Joe Ingles, who's not as good a defensive player, like on the wrong side of aging as a defensive player, playing all those positions. Kind of love it. They can all shoot. We'd be unbelievable offensively. With Rudy, we'd still be great defensively. Like, that one might be worth it. We might be really good. Like, we'd have to figure out how to defend, but we would be the best offense in the NBA. Like, Donovan Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic, Tobias Harris, Rudy Gobert as our 4 offensive players, and Royce, Joe, Jordan. I don't care at 5. And maybe you're not re-signing Jordan at that point, because it just got too steep for a long-term deal. Like that, we're pretty good. Like, we're the best offensive team in the league, I think. Well, maybe Dallas because of Luka and Kristaps. But I think we're probably the best offensive team in the league. Can we be good enough defensively? We're pretty good. Who's guarding LeBron? But it's like, okay, these are the discussions. Let's not kid ourselves. These are discussions. Same thing with the Jaylen Brown, Rudy Gobert discussion. Like, it's a discussion. Let's not kid ourselves. Oh, we can never talk about trading any of these guys. Like, that's actually the reality of the world, is that we always talk about possibly trading them. And so But the discussion is like, would you do it? Now we're digging deep. Now we want to know, like on the Jaylen Brown thing, like whether they complement each other. Can Jaylen Brown share the ball with Donovan? Will they complement each other, complete for touches? I think they would complement each other. It's only two stars, one in the ball. I think I'm not too worried. That was not a worry for me. It's when you get 3 and 4, you start adding up the touches. Thoughts on Bobby Portis if his team options declined by New York? He's still predominantly a 5, not a 4. We have money in Ed Davis and Tony Bradley at the 5. We would have to figure out what we're doing with those two things. And otherwise, I think Bobby Portis is interesting. Shoots it pretty well. Still pretty good athlete. Could defend correctly. Don't know how well he slides out to defend other players. I like Bobby Portis. If he's your backup center, I've talked about this all summer long and all now fall long, that's a lot. If you're paying Rudy 30, you really don't have a lot of money to pay your backup center. If you think Bobby Portis can play the 4 and the 5, and you can get 14 minutes of him a night as Rudy's backup and 14 minutes a night of him as the 4 with Rudy, I don't know that you can. I don't think you can. It would be my initial instinct, but I'm not putting my flag in the ground on that. Then that's probably not worth it. I want to hear more thoughts about your Serge Ibaka thoughts. I think that would be amazing fit. My real thoughts on Serge Ibaka, quite honestly, Marc Gasol is probably not re-signing in Toronto. Some reports say he's going to Spain, and they're re-signing Serge Ibaka because without Marc Gasol, they have to have Serge Ibaka. He'll be above the mid-level exception, and we'll never have a chance to sign him. I would certainly make a call to his agent and check. The concept was exactly what I just said. You play him as 14 minutes a night as your backup 5, and you're playing him 14 minutes a night as your power forward with Rudy because he can stretch the floor and defend, and you're long. I'm a big believer in secondary rim defenders right now. I think that's a massively important aspect of where this league is going. And so Ibaka would give you that, and it would give you the backup center. You'd have to then figure out Ed Davis and Tony Bradley. And I think that's kind of where I was on that. And it's a pretty good model for us to look at. Like, is there someone you can find who can play 14 minutes behind Rudy and 14 minutes with Rudy, and you pay that person or you trade for that person, and it makes you go from being a small team to a big team. That's the concept behind it. The concept is right. The answer of it being Serge Ibaka is probably wrong because I don't think that's really likely. Let's go to one more. Re-sign Mike Conley for more years and reduce his 2021 salary. Worthwhile thought. I don't know that Mike wants, I wouldn't say that Mike necessarily wants to sit around and, has anything happened that Mike says, I want to be in Utah for the rest of my career? Let's be like it. Do I want to sit behind Donovan for the rest of my career? Like, he sees that Donovan's a primary ball handler too. Like he watched that. So, if I'm Mike Conley, I'm probably taking my $30 million, but now understanding the way the market's going, Mike Conley's probably making 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 next year. And so if Mike Conley's 30 is here and 7 is here and 5 is there and he's now on 1-year contracts, and his next 3 years, he's actually going to only make 42, and you suddenly say, hey, we'll sign you a 3-year extension at 18 a year, and he's going to make 52, maybe he believes that. Now, you've got to get Mike's agent to buy in that he has no market after this year, and that'd probably be hard to do. Mike Conley for Blake Griffin. Do you think Blake Griffin can still play? These are great. You guys have got it. These are all worthwhile. There's nothing wrong with holding these conversations. These are the discussions. How about a sign and trade for Jordan Clarkson for a player? Perfectly fair. Who's an $11 million, $10 million player out there that we would sign and trade? It's somebody who wants Jordan Clarkson. That perfectly fair. Great. Another good one. Another possibility. So the only reason Jordan Clarkson signed is getting more than the mid-level. I do think we're going to have to pay Jordan more than the mid-level to get him. I have a fear that if we don't go above the mid-level by a considerable amount, Jordan Clarkson signs with the Clippers with his former coach Tyronn Lue in the city where he owns a house. California taxes are brutal, so maybe not. But he owns a place in California. I think that's where he resides. With everything going on in the world, being home, I think free agent signings are going to be interesting. I think players are going to look for a little more stability than they've had before, not have to uproot their family, not those kind of things. I don't think Jordan, in his short time in Utah, like made roots and built a house. I think he's super tight with Quinn. I think he's super tight with our players. But that would be my one concern on Jordan. If you're scared about losing him, it would be the Clippers signing him in the maybe even replace Lou Williams with his former coach, Tyronn Lue. And I don't know what his relationship with Tyronn Lue was. They went to the finals together, and then Lue didn't play him at the end of the finals, so maybe it's not great. But Lue wasn't the one who traded him. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Thank you very much. A lot of Aaron Gordon talk. That one's really interesting. I've been a big Aaron Gordon fan, and I watched him some games last year that made me wonder if he has any feel at all for the game. Might have been against us. They were like coming back on a comeback. I thought they had us on the ropes, and he pulled for a straightaway three in transition, missed it. We went fast break layup the other way. Game was over back on our side. It's one of those plays that made me go, oh, do you get it? Or are you just in your own gig? And this is why I would not be a good personnel scout, because I sit around and I have those moments and I can't get over them. But that one was a big one for me, for Aaron Gordon. It just showed a lack of feel of his teammates, a lack of feel of the game, a lack of feel of winning. It was against us last year. And I can't get it out of my craw. I love his athleticism. I loved him out of the draft. I think he could play the 5 and the 4. He's making a huge amount of money. Orlando's got to move him. There's a lot of reasons to consider that. Now I just gave you the negative. Unless we're getting Anthony Davis or LeBron James or Luka Doncic, nothing is like without a question mark, right? That's the game. It's why it's an inexact science. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe.